Okay, this is the last part for episode 7. Let's finish up the episode. So I'm not gonna talk about exactly what spurs Mateo to go apologize to Sarah, because I think there is a fantastic Tumblr post from one of my all-time favorite Druck Tumblrs, which is Evacuality. If I said it wrong, I'm so sorry. I hope that's even close to being right. But yeah, they have a fantastic Tumblr post about exactly why Mateo suddenly starts thinking about Sarah and suddenly gets the idea to apologize to her in this moment in particular. So please go read it. I've mentioned it before, but I adore how Sarah is developed. She's actually a person. She's not just a villain or an obstacle, which is how I think Emma was portrayed in the original. She was not given the respect that she deserved at all as a character, as a person. But Sarah is. Even if you really don't like Sarah for the things she's done, which I think you have a right to at this point, because she still has that post up on her Instagram about literally adding Mateo and saying that he's an asshole. But I think after this clip, you can really start to sympathize with her. And the show invites you to do that. The show lets you do that. The show gives you a chance. Whereas I don't think the show gave us a chance to sympathize with Emma in the original, like at all. Good on you, Druck. Thank you for actually making our female characters have some depth and not just be like villainesses. I like how this is blocked and framed as well. There's a lot of light once again, and there's plenty of room. There's so much room for both of them to breathe, which is very different from how every other scene between them has played out. A lot of the scenes, especially in the beginning of the season, were just so cramped and you always felt trapped, and the frames literally made you feel that way. There were so many instances in which Sarah comes into the frame and invades Mateo's space, and then there's also so many shots where Mateo escapes from Sarah's frame, showing that they're just not on the same page at all, and they both are being trapped by this relationship. But here, there's space between them. There's so much room for them to just breathe. And Mateo's apology is very direct. It is the most direct apology and the most direct way that he has built a bridge in this entire episode so far. And that's because he needs to. I've mentioned before that each bridge that he builds is specifically curated towards the person that he's building that bridge to. And for Sarah, he needs to have a very direct apology. He needs to explain himself and his rationale, at least a little bit. He also makes very direct eye contact whenever he's speaking to her, which is also very different from previous clips with them together. He would always avoid her gaze and kind of rip his eyes away from her. He would never speak up for himself or give himself any room or the respect to talk. There were a lot of instances in which Sarah would tell him exactly what to say, and then he would say it. But here, his apology is in his own words and in his own perspective. And I just love that parallel because it's different. It's not just a parallel in the sense that, oh, that's the same thing that happened back in episode 2. No, it's a parallel where you can see that there is a direct contrast between two events. And I'm saying that because in the original, this apology is very different. It's not an apology. That's how it's different. It is not an apology at all. It is a parallel in the sense that it is paralleling the same situation, in my opinion. I don't think they're different enough to show that Isak has grown and show that Isak has any more respect for Emma than he did back when he gave a bullshit apology in episode, 3? Yeah, episode 3. I don't remember the exact wording, but it calls directly back to that shitty apology. It shows little to no growth from Isak, which is so strange to me. And once again, is just more proof that the OG didn't respect Emma as a character, which I'm not a fan of, and I am so glad that this one is making a direct contrast from Mateo's previous apology. This is very different. He's actually speaking his mind, and it's in his own words. and it's very direct. And he's giving her the respect that she deserves. Even though she has done some shit too, they've both been shady towards each other, and they've both been immature. She deserves an apology. She does. I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that at all. And after this, she changes the caption on her Instagram post. So it shows that she's kind of giving the respect back to Mateo, which is another example of what I keep mentioning in every clip, is that by building one bridge, you're allowing another person to reciprocate that bridge or to build further bridges. It's like an exponential growth. As soon as you start opening up to people, everyone else is going to start to open up as well. And then, of course, there's this iconic line that everyone loves, and I love it too, of course. I really think that this is Mateo acknowledging how passive he has been so far, how he has just floated through life and has kind of found himself situated within the easiest, most normative boxes that he could find, and he didn't allow himself the freedom and the strength to question those boxes. He forced himself into the heterosexual passive box by refusing to speak up for himself, letting things happen, whatever, and pushing his true feelings for David down. Before, all he cared about was taking the easiest, most passive route because he didn't have the energy to explain himself. He just didn't fucking want to. And I think that is something that a lot of people relate to, and a reason why so many people love this line so much. But now he sees the value in action. He sees the value in standing up for himself and speaking for himself. And of course, Sarah definitely knows this feeling. And I love how Druck makes a parallel between the two of them in this clip. He asks, "Don't you know this feeling?" And even though Sarah doesn't say, "Yeah, I do," she then goes to talk about how her dad got laid off and how she hasn't talked to Leonie about it because she thinks she wouldn't understand. That's very similar to what Mateo has been going through. He has also stayed silent and isolated himself through his own struggles and not opened up to people. That's what Sarah's doing too. And it gives you something to grab onto. It gives you something to sympathize with her about. Because you're like, oh shit, she's been going through some shit too this entire time, just like Mateo has. Throughout the season, Druck has allowed us to sympathize with her by often framing a lot of the conversations between Sarah and Mateo as showing the reciprocal messiness of their actions. It's not just Mateo being messy. Sarah has also been messy. They have both hurt each other. And this clip ties all of that together by telling us that Sarah has felt a similar pressure. And I really love the full circle moment that shows a lot of Mateo's own personal growth when Sarah opens up and he immediately is like, have you talked to anyone? Have you opened up? He's taking the same advice that he was given in the last episode and he's giving it to Sarah. He is now someone who is allowed to give that advice because he knows that taking it has actually helped him quite a bit. And by Mateo building this bridge, Sarah actually has the strength to build her own bridge to Leonie. And she does open up about what she's been going through, and their relationship is strengthened, which once again is, I think, the central theme of this episode, is not just that building bridges are good for your own personal health, mental health, it also helps other people. It gives other people the strength and the willpower, the motivation, the, faith in humanity, maybe, to go out and build other bridges and fix their own relationships. The power of human connection, really, is what this episode is. So this is something that we've seen the guys do many times throughout the season. They're talking about sex, they're talking about relationships, but for once, Mateo is actually brought into the conversation. He is integrated within it. He has a place there. His relationship is included in the relationship talk. And then we have David's third drawing, which is 100% the most explicit way of David saying, hey, I want to run away with you in this fantasy land. David is still caught up in this fantasy. He's romanticizing that idea of running away. By doing that, he's, in turn pushing away the reality of it further and further. And that is a coping mechanism for him. I mentioned it before, but David doesn't think that it's possible for him to have true intimacy and connection with anyone in reality. So this is what he gets. What he thinks, what he's convinced himself that his life is. That's all he gets, that's all he deserves. And it's really fucking sad. And I think a really nice aspect of Mateo actually being integrated into the guys' relationship talks is that both Carlos and Jonas liken his situation to situations that they've been in the past, which further normalizes the idea that, hey, Mateo, it's all good. Like, relationships are relationships, and that's it. They're messy, they're hard, like, it's difficult, you need to talk to your friends about them. It doesn't matter who is in the relationship and what they identify as. Relationships are relationships, that's it. Carlos has been in a similar situation, the hot and cold thing with Kiki. Jonas has been in a situation where it's really important to be open and straight up and communicate. It doesn't matter that David is a guy. It does not matter. And I really love that. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, but I think Druck does a fantastic job of sewing in Jonas and Hannah's story throughout seasons 2 and 3. And I also think it's really funny that Jonas is like, you just need to be straight up. And that is absolutely what he's not being with Hannah. I think that's so funny, it's so realistic. For people just in general, but especially for a teenager to give some advice and then immediately do some shit that completely is the opposite of said advice. A little bit too realistic there, Jack. I feel a little bit attacked by that one. I love that moment. And this harkens back to something I kept saying throughout this episode, is that Mateo is very comfortable with his sexuality almost immediately after coming out. Like, he just came out. He just came out. It has been days, literal days, and he's already making gay jokes about himself. And I really love the look that Carlos gives Mateo after that joke, because it's not like he's offended at all. To me, it just looks like a fondness and like a shit, I'm really glad he feels comfortable enough to make that joke around us. That's what it looks like to me. I don't know, there just seems to be a lot of warmth coming from that specific facial expression. Okay, so Mateo's text, stop sending me drawings if you don't want to be with me. Very direct. He's rejecting those drawings, which are the fantasy, so he is also rejecting the fantasy. He's saying, dude, I want to be with you. I'm through with the fantasy. I'm through with the romanticizing of the running away. Like, no, I have done so many things in the past week that have helped me see that I can have an active role in my life. It is possible for me to be active and to speak my mind and to say what I want. And that's okay, and that's something I should do. Completely different from his relationship with Sarah, which consisted of him telling half-truths and never really saying what he wanted, using Sarah's words instead of his own words. This really shows a lot of growth for Mateo. He refuses to lie anymore. He refuses to be passive anymore. He's done. He has gone through so much personal growth throughout this episode, and he's not about to go back to who he used to be. He's not about to be passive anymore, and to him, being passive means, just accepting the drawings and accepting that, like, he just wants this fantasy, whatever. Like, no, he's not doing that. Mateo refuses to be passive, so he refuses to be part of that fantasy. The way that Jonas sprints out of the apartment, screaming and holding his vodka, so funny. I thought the original was funny in this part. No, this is brilliant. This is so funny. Mateo's so nervous too. Just more like subtle bits of realism here. Like, they are just teenagers. I love that shot. That shot makes me so emotional. Part of it is definitely the fact that the music starts pretty much right when this shot happens. But also how it's framed, like they're literally looking over Matteo and they're watching over him. This is pretty much Matteo's support system. And they're all literally watching over him and there for him and supporting him. And they love him and they want to make sure that it's all good. Oh God, I am not gonna cry. I am not about to cry right now. So this reunion, very different from the original. It's completely silent. No one says anything. The original is silent as well, but it's a lot more sexual, which works for Isak and Evan. Does not make sense for David and Matteo, so I'm very glad they didn't do that. Logically, it doesn't make sense because, of course, David still isn't out at this point, so of course they're not going to do anything sexual. But also just based on their vibes. This is so much more focused on just like the pure intimacy aspect of it and just being around each other again. Because also, the entire last episode, David was nowhere to be seen. David is very much about escaping, running away. That is a theme throughout this season, right? So when David says, I don't want anything from you, we don't see him at all in episode 6. We haven't seen him at all in this episode until now, too. In the OG, we saw Evan a little bit. We saw Isak run into him and it was awkward, but we haven't seen David. It's been a while since they've just been in proximity with each other. And we also know that Matteo as a character really values physical affection and just being close to people and leaning on people. This reunion does a fantastic job in balancing nervousness and a sense of foreboding with tenderness and just pure relief as well. And since it's so silent and slow, it really gives you a chance to listen to the song, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And the lyrics are weighty. They're saying some shit, okay? But it sounds so beautiful and so delicate. So it is another juxtaposition like there was back in the very first clip of this episode. How much weight there is right now between David and Matteo because there's so much that still hasn't been said and there's so much confusion and hurt. But there's also just like, oh my God, I've missed you. Like literally just, I missed being around you. I missed you being present in my life. And that feeling of the weight between them, you can clearly see it. It's not just a feeling, you can see it because first David opens his mouth to try to say something, but then he shuts it again. He's like, no. And then he goes to try to kiss Matteo, but then kind of swerves and just leans his head on his shoulder instead, and they just hug. So not only do you feel that kind of sense of foreboding that is at the same time still balanced by this relief, you can also see it as well with David's actions. It's very, very clear that David is super nervous for what is coming next. But even with that, and even with all of this weight in this silence between them, you also get the sense that they're just like okay with sitting in that silence for right now. They know something is coming, David more so than Matteo, but at least they're around each other, and at least they have both made a statement about what they want. Matteo has said, I want to be with you, ball's in your court, David. And then David, by coming here and showing up, is saying to Matteo, I want to be with you too, and not just in a fantasy, not just in the drawings. So the song, the last thing I want to talk about is this fucking song, dude. Oh man. So it's called You're Somebody Else by Flora Cash, and I'm really gonna go hard in these lyrics because I think they're beautiful, and I think, like I said before, it is so silent and there's not really much to focus on besides the lyrics, so I think they are really important and they're chosen very specifically because certain parts are actually cut out. I'm gonna split it into 3 parts, and I'm gonna talk about each part individually. So the first part says, I saw the part of you that only when you're older you will see too. And I think that those first 2 lines just describe a facet of love that is so pure and so innate. Like, it doesn't have to be romantic love. It can be any kind of love, but we've all felt something like that for someone, or we know that someone has felt something like that for us. Like, when you love someone in any way, into any capacity, you see parts of themselves that maybe they're not ready to fully accept yet, or maybe they don't see as beautiful yet. But you know that one day they are, and it's going to be so fucking fantastic when they finally do, and you're going to be there for all of it. I think those lyrics are so simple and so beautiful, and something that every single person can relate to. It is one of like the purest forms of love. The next few lines say, "It's like you told me, go forward slowly, it's not a race to the end." And I do think this could be a reference to the fact that David and Mateo's reunion is not a sexual one. It's more just driven by that need of intimacy. And like I said before, the nature of David's arc specifically, but both of their arcs really, it requires a slower development, especially in the sexual aspect. I think these lyrics are reinforcing the idea that going slow and having to take it slower for whatever reason is perfectly okay. And I love that. And then the chorus says, "Well, you look like yourself, but you're somebody else, only it ain't on the surface. Well, you talk like yourself. No, I hear someone else though. Now you're making me nervous." And I think you could take this in two ways. You could take it as David speaking to himself, or also as Mateo talking to David, noticing that there is something different about David. There is a weight between them. There is something that David desperately needs to get out, something that is clawing away at him, something that is making him act like someone he doesn't want to be. You could take it as that way. You can take it as David talking to himself. I think both work perfectly, and you could think of both at the same time. But I just think in general, this chorus is about feeling like your identity and who you really are is just not in line with your physical being. And whatever that means, you know. I think in this song specifically, and based on like the songwriter and what I've read about it, they're specifically talking about how when you are depressed or anxious, you can act in a way that makes you not really recognize yourself. You can look in the mirror and be like, who is that? Literally, who is that? So you can take it that way, but I think it also works perfectly for David's experience as a trans person. His identity hasn't matched his physical being, and there's a clear dissonance there. There have been plenty of times where he has looked in the mirror and not seen himself. I'm sure there's even more in this song that you could dig deeper into. Once again, I feel like I could just write a fucking dissertation about this song and how it's used in this clip, just like When I Was Older from the last clip. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to shut up now. I think that's it. Right? Yeah, that's it. Cool. Sick. That is finally all I have to say for this episode. I really liked this episode more than I thought I did. And I will see you guys next week, the regular upload schedule for episode 8. Thank y'all so much for watching and supporting and commenting and all the amazing stuff that y'all do. Thank you so, so much.